think there may be some others who are trying to get here, but anyway, we'll go ahead and start now. Multimedia, are you guys ready? All right, welcome to our last day of the week of Thesis. We'll have 4 more days next week, and then we will be finished. So we'll start today with Nicole. Nicole's got a topic that is really relevant here, especially in Indonesia, and especially in the sense that it's the kind of topic that maybe a lot of us would agree with, but it's just no one ever does anything about it. And it's a serious topic, and we need to take it seriously. So this is Nicole. These are her words. She says, "I would like to thank every single teacher who has generously given me their time, wisdom, and guidance in advising my thesis, because your support has helped me more than words can express. To my family and friends, thank you for listening, believing, and standing by me even when it felt heavy. And to myself, thank you for continuing to pursue this topic even when many were against it, because I'm dedicated to this work, to the millions of girls whose rights are still being debated. May this thesis serve as a contribution to ending FGM for their protection and freedom." Her title is "Beauty is Only a Cutaway: Why Female Genital Mutilation Should Be Banned and Criminalized." Give me a second to get the timer set up, and I'll tell you when you can start. All right, you can start when ready.
The cold floor envelops you in a hug, doing what the elders couldn't. Instead, their hands roam all over you, multiple holding you down, and the rest performing a procedure you thought was supposed to be a passage into womanhood. And what you get is pure agony, your energy drained, fighting the hands that never let go. Only a searing pain is all you feel. You don't even notice the pool of blood forming underneath you. Yet, the same people expect you to get up and go on and about with your day as if their hands hadn't just assaulted you. Forced to comply, you do as they say, but the pain never leaves. It's imprinted in your brain for life, and you have no choice but to get along with everyone. This is the reality of girls who are victims of female genital mutilation, or FGM. Albeit some go to doctors, their experiences are still the same: traumatizing and painful. If doctors cannot guarantee the safety of this procedure that has no health benefits at all, then why should it be in place? Why should it be a must for little girls? This is exactly why female genital mutilation should be banned and criminalized. Historical records trace FGM back to the 2nd or 5th century BC, where the Egyptians performed what was called the pharaonic circumcision. Over time, FGM did not remain confined to just one region and instead expanded by the slave trade during the Islamic expansion in Africa. In ancient Rome, for example, FGM was used as a method to prevent sexual intercourse and pregnancies, as it would hinder female slaves from doing their work. During the 1800s to 1900s in the West, doctors falsely labeled FGM as a cure for certain illnesses, such as depression. In modern-day Asia, some communities justify the practice under the guise of religion, while in Africa, they do it in the name of preserving culture and tradition. And I would like to make it clear that I will be talking about the traditional aspects in this thesis. Currently, there are over 230 million girls worldwide who are victims of FGM. And I would like to also make it clear that not all cases are documented. Most of them reside in Africa, followed by Asia, then the Middle East, and last, those who are migrating. In Indonesia alone, half of girls ages 11 and below have undergone this procedure. But before continuing with the thesis, I would like to define what FGM is. FGM, or female genital mutilation, can be defined as all procedures involving partial or total removal of the female external genitalia or other injuries to the female genital organs for non-medical reasons. It can be categorized into 4 types. In type 1, clitoridectomy. Some or all of the prepuce and or the clitoris is removed. Type 2, excision. Some or all of the clitoris and the labia minora is removed, with or without a cut to the labia majora. And type 3, infibulation. The vaginal orifice is narrowed and sewed by cutting the labia and clitoris. And last, type 4, all other harmful procedures done to the female genitalia for non-medical reasons, for example, pricking or scraping, and more. And out of all of them, type 3 is the most severe. Therefore, there should not be a question of how serious is FGM, because even from its name, the cruelty that lies behind it is evident. Its consequences are dire, countless health problems for its victims. It perpetuates gender-based discrimination and patriarchal control, and constitutes a gross violation to the fundamental human rights. Now, moving on to the first proof, which is female genital mutilation is in reality a profound medical betrayal, as women's gynecological, obstetric, and psychological well-being are compromised. The consequences can be categorized into short and long-term health consequences, but the long-term health consequences will be emphasized. First, the gynecological problems. It ranges from infections to cysts. It has been proven that there is an increase of up to 3.59% and higher for these complications. Bloodborne infections such as hepatitis B, C, and HIV skyrockets as procedures are frequently done without proper tool sterilization. Urethral problems make up about 22% of studied cases on FGM, as the scar tissue obstructs the opening, leading to cysts that require surgical excision. A study from the University of Birmingham estimates that FGM causes approximately 44,000 deaths annually across 15 high-prevalence countries, and that is equivalent to one girl dying every 12 minutes. Let me just remind you all that the death toll will rise if we include every other country still practicing it and the undocumented cases. As a result, FGM has become a more significant cause of death than HIV, AIDS, measles, meningitis, and more diseases in these countries. They found that the mortality rate rises by 0.1%. And while to many, it may seem small, but when applied on a larger scale basis, it is tens of thousands of women dying every year. In addition to the gynecological harm done, obstetric complications, which are health issues that can occur during pregnancy, labor, or delivery, affecting either the mother or the baby, typically happens. C-section, tearing, hemorrhage, and more diseases increases by 2.61 times more likely. And babies suffer too. The chance of death or stillbirth increases by 1.58%, and an additional 1 to 2 perinatal deaths per 100 deliveries were linked to FGM. This is due to the fact that the birth canal is destroyed and will compromise the delivery. Moreover, studies show that even if countries have rich resources, there is a higher risk of complications happening, such as prolonged or difficult labor, because when the scar tissue forms, it is inelastic. Last, these women go through an extensive amount of psychological trauma done after the ritual. The procedure is most often done on children ages 0 to 14 years old. And at such a critical stage of identity formation, the early childhood and adolescent stage is a very vulnerable period. They are held down by multiple adults and cut without anesthesia. The psychological imprint of that betrayal, either by family or community member, lasts for decades. It is no wonder why they undergo post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, an increase in suicidal rates, and more. This is what happened to Lelo too. She was cut at just 5 years old and deeply resents her family for betraying her, as she regularly experiences panic attacks. When she migrated to Canada, she feared judgment and shame so badly to the point where she was unable to tell her therapist about her experience. Moving on to the second proof, gender-based discrimination and patriarchal control are perpetuated through FGM. The clitoris, which is the primary organ of sexual sensations, is cut off during the procedure to control women's bodies and make them docile and submissive sexually. It decreases their libido, and victims are 2.51 times more likely to report a complete lack of sexual desire compared to those who have not. They do it to make men feel satisfied by making the vaginal opening narrow and to ensure that girls stay as virgins by declining extramarital sexual activity. Consent, however, is absent from these discussions. Since the procedure is most often done on children, they are incapable of decision making and are unaware of the damage that will follow. This frames women as sexual beings whose primary roles are supposed to be wives or mothers, and that immense pleasure is higher than that of a woman's safety. This control stems outward and ultimately degrades women by upholding harmful gender norms. Marriage is tied to FGM, and those who are uncut are deemed as promiscuous or unclean, essentially unworthy. The same survey also cited that in Nigeria, where the prevalence can reach up to 35%, around 84% of mothers opposed the practice, but were overridden by fathers who control the family prospects and family honor. It proves that women are forced to be the community enforcers of a patriarchal system in which they may not support. Now, moving on to the third proof. Another underlying problem is the fact that harm is spreading towards their dignity and the perception that they are to be conformed to the world of FGM. A 2026 study found that practicing communities perceive FGM as honor and prestige, while uncircumcised women are perceived as masculine or lacking virtue. One person even said, "Their genitals are ugly if you don't circumcise." These girls experience humiliation and rejection on a daily basis by their cut peers, and their daughters were not spared. They were portrayed as less than human. One mother even said to her daughter, "It is over. Now you're a girl that every boy wants to marry and that our community respects." Even in medical settings, healthcare workers will call upon their colleagues to stare at circumcised genitals. This causes survivors to avoid antenatal care visits and skilled birth attendants, risking death in order to escape judgment. In areas such as Guinea, where the prevalence can reach up to 97%, a choice in FGM is nearly impossible. Last, female genital mutilation is a profound violation of the fundamental human rights, through which the right of health and physical integrity are directly infringed. It is the broad category that holds other laws beneath, and these conventions have been established and agreed upon by all nations around the globe to set a standard and establish rules on critical global issues, thereby intensifying the severity of FGM. The practice of FGM is a clear infringement on the elimination of all forms of discrimination against women, or the CEDAW Act, as it is rooted in gender-based violence. Under Article 12.1 of the CEDAW Act, it is stated that states should take appropriate measures to eliminate gender-based discrimination against women, especially in healthcare, which guarantees that everyone has equal access. In many cases, women do not receive adequate medical care and attention following the procedure, resulting in their preventable deaths. However, even when medical attention is accessible, the practice is still at times normalized or even facilitated. This is proven true by the story of Dr. A. Renee Bergstorm, who got cut in South Dakota by a doctor because her mother noticed that Renee was touching her genitals during playtime. At age 15, she unknowingly drove herself to the same clinic because of her unbearable pain and was instead lectured about the sin of self-pleasuring. Next, FGM is a further violation to the right to be free from torture. As defined in Article 1.1 of the Convention Against Torture, torture involves any act by which severe pain or suffering, whether physical or mental, is intentionally inflicted on a person. In many cases, it is stated women do not receive adequate medical care and attention, as I have stated previously. Now, this generalization is further strengthened by the Special Reporter 2008 report, which stated that FGM directly violates the law. Following that, Articles 2.1 and 4.1 have repeatedly said to enact and enforce criminal legislations that prohibits all acts of torture, including FGM. Under Article 4.2, it stated that state practitioners should be punished appropriately with grave penalties for being involved in the act of torture, especially towards children. If for some reason states fail to punish medical workers, it means that the state is allowing it to happen, and as a result, they are responsible and will be held accountable. Last, it violates the law of the rights of child and the denial of consent. As stated in Article 24, Paragraph 3 of the Convention of the Rights of Child, states are obliged to abolish any type of traditional practices that are harmful to children. FGM clearly falls under that category as they deliberately target children because they are conditioned to follow their elders' commands and cannot consent. By upholding these laws, states give the impression that there should be no justification of violence against children, setting an example for many and ending the practice. Now, while a lot of people do support the ending of FGM, there are many practitioners who would like to keep this tradition alive by comparing it to male circumcision. It is often done during the infancy stage where infants cannot consent. They emphasize the fact that male circumcision is not a sensitive practice, as many societies have welcomed and even accepted the tradition as the norm, even going as far as to promote it. It is true that the foundation of doing both practices are the same, cutting up a minor's genitalia without their consent. Nevertheless, the reasoning behind this claim cannot be supported. Female genital mutilation is a procedure that has no health benefits at all, which is completely different to male circumcision. Multiple studies have proven that male circumcision's benefit far outweighs the risk. The chances of getting HIV, penile cancer, and other diseases severely decreases. Along with that, men who get the procedure done afterwards do not complain. Around 96% of men who get male circumcision done are happy with the results, even recommending it. And 98% of those same men enjoy the same level of sexual satisfaction and performance compared to those who did not get it. This is a significant difference compared to FGM, as there is only pain involved. Some also argue that it is deeply embedded into their culture, thus part of their identity. During the colonial era, Western nations would send missionaries to eradicate local rituals, use disrespectful terms, and exploit natural resources when the locals live in poverty. Their fears are justified. No one wants part of their identity to be erased. However, while identity is important and their trauma is justified, it raises the question, at what point does culture push its boundary into a criminal act? If the existence of culture is to harm society's most vulnerable aspect, children, can it remain standing against moral and legal arguments? It cannot be invoked as a shield against the justifications of harming children and going against human rights. The WHO have repeatedly stated that it is in their best interest to serve and protect these kids, no matter if traditional practices need to be abolished. For example, foot binding in China, or the sati practice in India, where widows are burned either voluntarily or by force following their husband's death, have been abolished. Their eradication does not mean weakness or surrender towards Western ideologies. Rather, it symbolizes an ethical progress and showcases other parts of what makes them who they are, while maintaining their dignities. Now, throughout this thesis, we have demonstrated why female genital mutilation should be banned and criminalized. Its consequences are dire, countless health problems for its victims that could even affect newborns and result in death. It perpetuates gender-based discrimination and patriarchal control by decreasing their libido and forcing these girls to get the procedure done. And last, it violates the fundamental human rights laws in which states are both legally and morally obliged to follow. By now, the irony is evident. We do not call a prison cell a house. We do not call shackles a jewelry piece. And we certainly cannot call mutilation a tradition when it destroys a child's body before she even has words to comprehend what she has lost. This is why we, as a society, should ban FGM. No one should be forced to comply with mutilating their bodies, and the preventative measures should start now. It starts with criminalization and enforcement. However, law alone is insufficient. Men must reject marriageability requirements. Healthcare workers must refuse to perform FGM, and governments must invest their funding into education programs. Last and most importantly, families must be there to support the end of FGM. What remains now is the will to act, not someday, but now, because the longer we wait, a life is gone every 12 minutes in 15 high prevalence countries. Thank you.
Wow, great job, Nicole. Panelists today are Mr. JC and Miss Intan. We'll go with Miss Intan first.
Okay, Nicole, thank you for the insightful speech. I want to ask if cultural traditions are deeply connected to identify and history, who has the moral authority to decide when a tradition should be banned?
Thank you for your question. So I believe that, and I and a lot of survivors believe that it is up to these survivors to abolish and abandon these types of practices that are harmful. And these victims should come out and go forward with their stories to help end these type of practices that are harmful to children. So ultimately, the decision to abolish these types of traditions, one, lies in the victims, and two, it lies in the government so that the government can help eradicate this problem.
Right. So, could the global movement against FGM be viewed as a form of Western cultural imperialism rather than purely a human right effort? Can you
Thank you
please
for.
explain?
Okay, sorry. Thank you for your question. So I actually discussed this in my thesis in the refutation part, and a lot of people believe that it is not Western, it is not going against Western ideologies and leaving behind these cultures and these people that have grown up with it. Rather, it symbolizes an ethical progress and showcases the other aspects of what makes them who they are while maintaining their dignities. Because essentially, what they're doing is they're cutting up a healthy tissue and then they're portraying it as tradition. So, no, the Western nations, it does not mean that we are conforming to the Western nations. Rather, we are just saving these girls from more harm done in the future.
Okay. So, if many women within practicing communities continue to support FGM, can the practice still be fully defined as operation?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
If many women within practicing communities continue to support FGM, can the practice still be fully defined as operation?
Oppression, you mean? Okay, thank you for your question. So, in my thesis, I have stated that a lot of women actually support the end of FGM. For example, in Nigeria, where the prevalence can reach as high as 35%, around 84% of mothers actually oppose the practice because they are the same people who are once victims of the same tradition, and their stories are the same. Basically, they want to run away, but they are unable to do so and were brought back to their communities to force these procedures on them. And as a result, these women felt the need to protect their kids but are unable to do so because their community enforces the belief that FGM should be taught into these kids. And along with that, a lot of men believe that it should still be in place because they are the ones who control the family prospects and the marriage honor too.
Okay. So why should FGM be criminalized while male circumcision remains socially and legally accepted in many countries?
Thank you for your question. So, based on my research, a lot of male circumcision's benefit far outweighs the risk. For example, the benefits are reduced in HIV, penile cancer, SCI, and other types of STDs, which is why it is very common throughout the world and promoted so heavily. Well, compared to FGM, as I've stated before, what you're doing is essentially cutting up a healthy tissue, and in type 3 of FGM, they are sewing the opening so that the opening is a only very tiny opening and it can have a lot of harmful effects from it. For example, the menstrual flow, it will actually slow down the flow because what they're doing is it's only a tiny hole. So it disrupts the flow and it keeps the blood inside, which means that there is a lot of infection and bacteria that can get into the canal.
So, if some forms of FGM are medically less severe, should all forms still be categorized equally as mutilation?
Thank you for your question. So, based on my research, yes, all forms are categorized as mutilation because I believe that you're mentioning type 4, which is basically the less invasive procedures out of all of them. In type 4, what they do is essentially they either prick, pierce, or scrape the genitalia. And in my opinion, and a lot of survivors also believe that it should still be constituted as mutilation because if we do not constitute it as a mutilation, then it creates a legal loophole for these medicalized personnel to essentially perform these procedures on girls. And based on my research also, I also found that a lot of these healthcare workers that perform FGM on these women, they actually cut more tissue, more healthy tissue compared to traditional practitioners. So in a sense, it is worse.
Okay. So, can criminalization alone truly eliminate FGM? Or will it simply push the practice underground and make it harder to monitor?
Thank you for your question. So this is actually a very debated topic on, and a lot of people do have the belief and the perception that if we were to criminalize this practice, then it may drive these practices underground. But it's actually the opposite. A lot of researchers believe that if we were to criminalize and ban this procedure, then it would actually shine more light to these procedures. And because as I have mentioned before, other traditional practices that are harmful, for example, foot binding in China or the sati practice in India, where widows are burned either voluntarily or by force following their husband's death, have been abolished. And that is because the governments have actually criminalized it.
So, regarding to the parents, yeah, if parents genuinely uh, believe FGM protects their daughters' honor and future, should they be treated as criminal or as victims of generasi- generational conditioning?
Can you repeat the question and
Okay,
elaborate more?
if parents genuinely believe FGM protects their daughters' honor and future, should they be treated as criminals or as victims of generational conditioning?
Thank you for your question. So a lot of survivors believe that it's actually both. They are also they should be criminalized and they're also the same victims because we need to remember that the reason why these women actually do FGM on their daughters is because they're also the same victims of this tradition. But the thing with them is that they are strictly put in a community where it is very tightly that FGM should be done on these women. And that's why they have this perception that they need to be conformed to this world of FGM. But as we know, the consequences, there are too many health consequences that should not be neglected. So as a result, these women, they need to have better understanding of what's happened to their female anatomy because they have also undergone this procedure. They know what the harmful effects are. So it should go hand in hand.
All right. So my last question here. What should take priority when the two conflict, preserving cultural tradition or protecting universal human rights?
Thank you for your question. So I believe that it is very important to do both. But the difference with FGM is that FGM does not have any health benefits at all, and other traditions may have benefits of their own, which is completely different to FGM. So as a result, I believe that it should be criminalized, but we also need to remember that not every single tradition needs to be abolished.
Thank you, Ms. Intan. Mr. JC?
Yeah. Hi, Nicole.
Hi, sir.
Thank you for your presentation. And this is very, I think this is the first time that this topic is brought in our school, and
Yes.
especially in this classical school, yeah. In which that I think, the audience here, the people here maybe are not so much the people that need to be addressed, so much about this, right? But you made it anyway, which is good. And I hope the recording here can be somehow broadcasted to many parts of the world so that people can see your presentation somehow. But my first question is a very simple one. Why do you think you chose this topic? Is there any something, an event maybe that somehow bothered you, such that you were moved to research about this and to dare to present about this before people?
Thank you for your question. So I understand where you're coming from. A lot of people have actually told me that they don't understand why I actually chose this topic. But I first chose this topic because in SOL, I stumbled upon a documentary talking about FGM in Singapore. And I was shocked because a country as progressive, safe, and as well educated as Singapore still has this practice going on. So I thought to myself, what are the chances that other countries that are less progressive as Singapore are still doing this practice? And when I dove deeper into the documentary and my research, I found that Indonesia was actually one of the highest prevalence of FGM under the guise of religion. And a lot of countries in Africa still do it for their own traditional aspects. And that is why I wanted to bring light to this topic, because I didn't know that there was a lot of people in Indonesia that are victims to the same practice. So I wanted to shine light on it.
Yeah, it's something like a kind of silent majority phenomenon.
Yes.
You know, like yeah, I was wondering beforehand if you met somebody who underwent this kind of situation, but yeah, it was based on a document. Yeah, that's what I
Yes.
experienced also many years ago in sociology textbook. I read about it and I felt disturbed about it.
Yes.
And I read more articles about it, and I was like, no, this is crazy. This is not okay. But again, you mentioned also in, I forget, maybe in the confirmation part about that the doctor who
Yes.
underwent also that kind of mutilation.
Yes.
An American, yeah. Is she an African American?
She is American. She got caught in South Dakota.
Or South Dakota.
Yes.
And then Dr. siapa tadi?
Dr. Irene Bergstorm.
And then eventually she was brought to a doctor who was a Seventh-day Adventist.
Yes.
Now, it seemed to me that by your explanation, I know maybe I need more clarification about it. And the doctors say that when it disturbs this woman again many years later, and then he said that you should not do something like you should not do, like self-pleasure seeking is not okay or something like that, implying that, correct me if I'm wrong, implying that, hey, what you just did was actually, your aim was just to do your masturbation like that,
Yes.
right? And that masturbation is sinful, you know. But I'm just wondering, do the Adventists also believe in this kind of thing? Do they buy this kind of circumcision thing?
Okay, thank you for your question. So, based on my research, I noticed that FGM was actually a very popular cure for certain diseases such as depression, masturbation, frigidity, or even headaches. And Dr. A. Renee Bergstrom, she was unfortunately cut when she was just 3 years old in South Dakota by a doctor of the Seventh-day Adventist Church because her mother noticed that Renee was touching her genitals. And during that time, in the 18 to 1900s, it was very common. And because it was so common, the doctor thought that it would be appropriate for Dr. Renee to get the procedure done because she wanted to help the Dr. Renee and also help, I guess, calm down the mother of her concerns.
So, it's not really. It doesn't mean actually that the Adventists, in general, I mean, believe this doctrine that there's a doctrine in Seventh-day Adventist church that FGM is recommended to be done.
Yes.
No, yeah.
No.
As far as I know, also that in Christianity, in all, even in Islam, it seems that it's not really mandated.
Yes.
But it's just like the pre-Islamic, like what you mentioned about Egyptian culture, the Nubian, the Eritrean, those people actually who were the people who mandated this to be done by the people, yeah.
Yes.
But I don't know, yeah. Unfortunately, many Muslims in Indonesia still believe that this act should be done, at least type 4. Yeah, I think you maybe you have research about this, that in one interview that I watched about sexologists that say that, and even the sexologist kind of promotes that, I mean supports this, that it's just symbolic incision, hanya ditaruh saja di apanya begitu, in the genital gitu ya,
Yes.
begitu saja taruh the knife begitu, only that, and then that's it gitu. So it's not really incision, or it's not really circumcision begitu. But why do you think that the Islamic tradition, I mean, many Indonesian people, many of them are adherents to Islam, still brought up this pre-Islamic, basically pagan, maybe we could say, in terms of Islam, yeah, pagan culture back, I mean, into their midst, into their daily life, yeah.
Thank you for your question. So, based on my research, I found that in Islam there is a certain term that directly translate in English to circumcised genitals. And as a result, a lot of people interpret that meaning as men and women alike should get FGM done. And that is the reason why a lot of Muslim communities believe that they should do FGM. However, I would like to note that a lot of Muslim leaders, they actually do not support FGM because it is not directly stated in the Quran compared to a male circumcision when it is stated that males should get circumcision done.
Yeah.
And that's why there's a lot of this debate going on that is it right for females to get circumcision done or no?
Yeah, as far as I know, also just like what you said, it's just for the male. I mean, for the male, it's mandatory. Yeah, circumcision is mandatory, but not for the female. But anyway, they still do it. Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
quite many of them, maybe not all of them, but many of them still do it, especially those who are fundamentalist Muslims. Yeah. You mentioned in your thesis paper that FGM can promote hepatitis somehow, and then also even can promote also infertility at some point. Even though you mentioned that more research should be done, I'm just wondering about fertility first, and then later hepatitis. Yeah, I mean, how is it? How is it going? If let's say FGM could promote those two unwanted things, yeah.
Based on my research, I didn't really dove deeper into infertility because, as I said, there is a lack of research regarding that topic. But based on what I have read and based on what these researchers have said, the reason why infertility happens is because when we are sewing and cutting up the genitalia, it is a very sensitive tissue, and they are not using proper tool sterilization, which as a result, a lot of bacteria and infections can go in.
Okay.
Yeah,
About the hepatitis,
yes.
how about that?
The hepatitis B, C, and HIV, it's actually done because of without proper tool sterilization. So as a,
Again,
yes,
the same thing. The same thing
Yes,
then. Yeah,
essentially the same
also. Like the more viability for virus to get in and
Yes.
things like that. Yeah. Okay. Now about consent. Yeah. Do you agree that for boys, yeah, for male human beings, it's okay to circumcise? Do you believe that it's okay to circumcise them even though without their consent? For example, at a very early age, because that's what I think many Christians do that also now. Many Christians. Well, I don't do that to my son. I want him, if he wants to be circumcised sometime in the future, it should be by his consent. But many Christians do that also now, even following the the Torah tradition, 8 days, and then before 8 days, and then it should be circumcised. Or even Muslims, yeah, many Muslims sort of like kind of urge their sons to be
Yes.
circumcised. Yeah, what do you think about this kind of phenomenon in terms of consent? Yeah.
Thank you for your question. So I believe that as long as a procedure actually has a good benefit towards the child, then I believe that it should be okay. Because, for example, in male circumcision, the benefits for male circumcision far outweighs the risk. Like I've said, HIV decreases, and penile cancer decreases. So I believe that it is still can be allowed. However, I do believe that it's also up to the parents if they want to decide to get male circumcision done on their boys or not.
But even though without the consent from the boy first, do you think that's fair? I mean, according to universal human rights, let's
Yes.
say. Is that all right?
Thank you for your question. So, when I was doing my research, a lot of researchers stated that if a minor if a minor cannot consent, then the duty solely falls under the parents, and as a result, they are the ones who hold the amount of consent. For example, I believe that these types of practices can be, I guess, correlated to, like, for example, the vaccine, because essentially, can it harm children? Yes, it can. Do they have their children's consent? No. But then it has a lot of good benefits for it. But at the end of the day, it directly falls under the parents' wants and needs for their boys.
Thank you, Nicole. So proud of you.
Yes, sir.
So I have a question for you, Nicole. What are the laws in Indonesia? Is it technically illegal in Indonesia, or is it, have the laws just ignored it?
Thank you, Mr. Reid, for your question. So, when I was doing my research, Indonesia was actually one of the highest countries of people doing FGM. And if I'm not mistaken, in 2012 or 2014, they actually medicalized the practice. So, what it means is that FGM can be done under the pretense of medical workers. But recently, Indonesia has actually not support that law anymore, and they actually criminalized it in 2024 because what I've researched on is that a lot of healthcare workers they cut more tissue compared to those of a traditional practitioners. If I'm not mistaken, it is about 44% of healthcare workers that does that takes more healthy tissue compared to medical practitioners. And that is one of the reasons why FGM is actually banned and criminalized in Indonesia.
All right. Time is actually up. You did a great job, Nicole. Yeah, really good job, Nicole. So what we'll do is we'll meet friends and family, panelists, advisors over here.